Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're bringing you a first look at Tier 9 British tech tree heavy cruiser, HMS Drake. Now, once upon a time, we used to have a look at these on the PTS. Those days are over. It seems to be anyway. Wargaming has started gifting us these ships to actually play without being able to have a kind of a look and don't touch period on the PTS, which is what used to happen. So let's have a peek around now. I mean, there's a couple of Drake. I've got a Drake game coming on the channel later this week, if it's not already up by the time I post this video. But you'll be able to see a little bit of gameplay. But let's at least just have a look over the ship. First things first, health pool. 46,800 points. This is really solid. Not best in tier, but very competitive. For the tier 9 German cruiser Roon is still the king of kind of like regular heavy cruisers here. I.e., I'm not really comparing Drake to the super cruisers in this tier, Alaska, Azuma, and Kronshtadt, because they are kind of in a class all by themselves. But Drake has a pretty respectable HP pool given what I'm really comparing her to, which is the other heavy cruisers at the tier, like Brindisi, Buffalo, Roon, and so on. 22% torpedo protection right there ties Brindisi for best in tier. That's kind of nice to have. So, again, we got a lot of hit points. We've got a pretty good TDS. How do we look for armor? Armor-wise, she has the best belt armor of the aforementioned kind of non-super cruisers as well, coming in with 177 millimeters here that covers her from forward of turret A all the way back aft to just astern of turret 6, turret X, basically just from barbette to barbette, essentially. She also has, let me show you this here. I gotta turn off some things so you can see it. She has a spaced armor scheme. You see it there? I see these gaps in here. There's this actual citadel inside, and the belt armor's out here. So she has a spaced armor scheme kind of similar to how San Luis armor is laid out at Tier 9. In theory, this ship should be very difficult to citadel unless she's perfectly broadside to whoever's shooting at her. The remaining armor is what you'd expect, right? She has 25 millimeter extremities, though she does have, I gotta turn this back on, she has 30 millimeters of deck armor, which is a little unusual. Most of the other heavy cruisers around this tier have 27 or 25 millimeters of deck armor. So that just gives her a little bit more of a leg up on her counterparts as well. Sadly, from a defensive standpoint, her AA is a bit on the weak side, okay? It's not bad. It's just not kind of up to snuff where most of the other Tier 9 cruisers that you're comparing her to you would expect it to be. There are only 3 Tier 9 cruisers currently that have less overall raw AA power than Drake does, and that's Kronshtadt, Azuma, and Ibuki. Literally everybody else beats her out. Roon, Buffalo, Seattle, Neptune, everybody. So it's a bit of a letdown from Bedford. It's just not as good as you would wish it to be for the tier, especially coming from a British cruiser where historically the Brit cruisers have pretty respectable AA. Drake's a bit of a letdown here. Offensively, this is where things start to get a little weird. Offensively, Drake is in a category all by herself. Most Tier 9 cruisers come to the dance with either 152mm guns, 6 inches, 203mm guns, 8 inches, or 305mm guns, 12 inches. The only previous outlier to this kind of rule was Tier 9 Russian cruiser Dmitry Donskoy. She has 180mm guns, which is like 7.1 inches or something. Drake has 234mm guns in a 3x3 configuration. You see 2 turrets there up forward. And there is, of course, turret AB, and then we've got turret X back here at the stern. And these are their 9.1 inches. This is a very odd caliber. These guns reload every 16.5 seconds. So while that's not as punishing as Brindisi at this tier, which reloads in 20 seconds, it's significantly slower than everybody else aside from those super cruisers we're not really comparing her to. That mount 12-inch guns, right? I'm sure that some of that reload speed has to do with the caliber. It just feels awkward, though, when you factor in that the shells just don't feel like they hit all that hard, right? I mean, 3350 HE is almost the same shell damage out of HE shells as you get out of Ibuki, which is an 8-inch Japanese shell, right? It just feels awkward. Now, you could equip main battery modification 3 to reduce this reload. By the way, the port UI there says 15 seconds. That's a lie. It's currently 16.5 seconds. So you could install MBM3 and reduce it down to like 14.5 seconds. But let me tell you why you won't. look at the range, right? I'm showing you range. That range says 18.4 kilometers. That's because I have Gunfire Control System Mod 2 installed. Without that, her base range is 15.9 kilometers. She barely has more range than Buffalo and Seattle. She does have less range than even Neptune and Ibuki. I mean, yeah, she's kind of stealthy. We'll get to that in a minute. But you basically have to install Fire Control System Mod 2 to get these guns out to a usable range. Like 15.9. I don't know. I'm not convinced that these guns are usable with a sub 16 kilometer range. On top of that, and I talked about this earlier, like her shells just don't feel like they hit all that hard. I said her HE shells are roughly equivalent to those that are thrown by Ibuki. The AP shells hit just a little harder than the American Super Heavy shells, the 8-inch American Super Heavy shells that Buffalo puts out. Her HE and AP damage per minute numbers do not compare well to basically anything in the tier. She's essentially at the bottom of the list in both categories. So offensively, this is a ship that just... She's either looking for the big alpha strike because her overall DPM is not very good, and she's looking to hang in, or she's looking to hang in a game as long as she can in order to build up a respectable damage total. She does have the torpedoes you're familiar with by now. These are the same torpedo armament as Bedford, one quad launcher on each side of the ship. These are the same torps that Edinburgh, Neptune, Minotaur, Bedford, and Goliath all mount 10 kilometers, 62 knots of speed, etc., etc. You're used to these if you've played any of these ships, okay? Now, one thing that Drake is pretty competitive in is speed. 33 knots, right? She's right in the middle of the pack. This is typical of very common speed for most Tier 9 cruisers. She's also pretty spry, right? 760 meters on a turning circle and a base rudder shift time of 11 seconds. The 8.8 you're seeing there is because I have Steering Gears Mod 2 installed. She has pretty similar handling characteristics to Neptune, although you should note that the British heavy cruisers do not get the fancy acceleration and speed coefficients in turns that their light cruiser brethren do. And I can tell you this because I can install... Not there. Here it is. I can actually install Propulsion Modification 2 on the heavy cruisers. You cannot install this mod on the British light cruisers because they kind of already get it for free. It's like a little bonus. Detection-wise, now this is where she really freaking trolls people. You can't see this with a commander or without. I have no commander, no camo on this ship. But basically, when you fully rig this ship for stealth, her detection gets down to 9.6 kilometers. That's bloody trolly. For a ship with 9-inch guns, she ties Seattle for the lowest detection of all Tier 9 cruisers. This thing outspots Ibuki, for pity's sake. So this ship is like built to sneak up on you and whack you when you aren't expecting it, especially if you are in a light or another heavy cruiser and you're not sure where a Drake, there's a Drake on the board, you're not sure where she is. She can definitely surprise you with a 9.6 detection. Consumables-wise, just what you'd expect, or just what you're used to seeing now from the other ships up to this point in the line. Got to hit the right button here. Here we go. So, of course, we have Heal, Hydro, and Spotter Plane. These are, as before, the only options you get. So this is the fancy Super Heal that British cruisers get starting at Tier 8. This is British Destroyer Hydro, short range, long duration, and just regular Joe Blow Spotter Plane. So there you go. Quick look at HMS Drake. This is a ship I haven't quite figured out yet, guys. These 234mm guns, they just feel so awkward. I want to play this ship like I play a Roon, but you can't, because the guns reload too slow. And yeah, you get really good performance out of the HE shells. They have a great fire chance. You can burn things reliably, but it just, the reload just really, really gimps her. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure her out a little bit. So we'll see as time goes on. I haven't had but a handful of games in her. Anyway, guys, there you go. Quick look at Drake. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there, and I'll catch you next time.